everyone, and welcome back to In the KIoTchen, Conversations on IoT with Breadware. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, CEO at Breadware. And today I have Rick Fiacco with me. He is the Manager of Business Development for North America for IMS Connector Systems. Rick, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Kerry, thank you very much for having me.
All right. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you are so passionate about the electronics industry.
Sure. I've been involved in electronics or the interconnect field since I graduated college. This includes not only RF, but DC, AC power through high-frequency RF. Recently, I've had a significant focus on telecom. I've lived through the development and evolution of cellular communications, analog through 5G digital. I hold 2 patents, so I'm a technical person, and these were done for AT&T. Recently, I joined IMS Connector Systems, who's headquartered in Germany, as Manager of Business Development for North America. IMS Connector Systems is an international technology company focusing on the design and manufacture of high-frequency interconnect. The range of products they develop runs from RF coaxial connectors, assemblies, switches, and various connectors for communication, automotive, and industrial markets. My focus in developing the North American market is in communications, which happens to include IoT and IIoT. This research has brought me to Breadware, whom we've recently had discussions with.
Great. And so why are you so passionate about this? What got you into this space?
I've been an electronics geek from start.
Yeah.
So I got involved in this, and then I started getting a little bit more involved with it. And then when cellular communications came through, I really found my home there. I've run partnerships with companies. I ran a partnership with Lucent Technologies and another interconnect company. And as I've developed as a person, I've followed that trend. So yes, I do enjoy it.
Yeah, well, 2 patents in it. We're a big believer in patents around here, especially Stone Age parent company of Breadware. I think we've got, almost 200 patents. What are your patents in?
Well, one of them is on an RF connector, strange as it may seem. That was done for an AT&T project on a backplane. And the second was for a cable, also done for AT&T. I think it was called a digital access cross-connect switch. Don't ask me what it is, but I did develop the cable for it.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, let's talk a little bit more about IMS. So what kind of products do you develop that specifically helps with IoT applications?
Yeah, sure. IoT, as you may or may not know, roughly runs to about 6 gigahertz frequencies. So there's a wide range of interconnect that is available for use in IoT. You can run anywhere from, we can do antenna cables going up the towers, which is high power RF, or the millimeter wave connectors, which are very tiny, to go to the peripherals, and the boards that somewhat like the boards that I've seen at Breadware. I think you call it the slice.
Mm-hmm.
So our discussions with you folks have been around that type of an interface.
Yeah. And so I've heard you describe it as the plumbing of an IoT system, RF connectors being the plumbing. And I love that, of course, because we make sewer cleaning tools and plumbing is a part of my life.
I figured you would.
On each side. So tell us what you mean by that.
Sure. During my career, I've actually had to train people in both electronics, electrical, and RF. And I found the easiest way to start doing that training, especially with the younger folks, is to describe it as plumbing, water through a pipe. But instead of running water through it, you're running components, electrical components, electronics through these pipes. Basically, it's electrons. That tends to let people understand how this works. In addition, one of the problems with the design of the systems, the electronic systems, the plumbing is usually left to last, and that causes issues. If you can picture building construction and forgetting about the plumbing until the very last section, you're going to have issues. So you're trying to get the people to understand that the plumbing has to be addressed almost at the inception.
And it sounds like maybe you have a story of plumbing gone wrong. Do you have an example that you can share of like what happens when you don't take it into the RF into the design soon enough, or if it's designed incorrectly?
Well, there's been a few of them. I'll tell you one that involved the major telecom company. They had an issue with the base stations. There was a section of the base station that was heating up and sometimes catching fire. So I got called in, I took a look at it, and what I saw was a board, a backplane, which had probably 60 board mount SMA connectors. And if you know that connector at all, it has to be mated to a cable connector, and they have to be torqued together. These connectors were so close and in such a configuration that no one would be able to get in and torque them correctly. So what happens was you've got these connectors mated to a cable. Picture about 60 cables, and someone comes in and swings them to the side. It's called cable management. Some of these connectors loosened up. Now, what happens with an RF connector when it's not assembled correctly is it heats up. If it's too loose, the interface is not done correctly, it can heat up and ultimately catch fire. And that's what happened. So I took a look at it, and our team sat down and said, well, instead of going to that type of connector, let's take a look at something that resembles a snap-on or an AirQuip type interface, where you can snap it on, there's no tooling, and once you pull the cables aside when you do your cable management, they rotate with absolutely no loss of signal and no heat generated. It costs the company probably 4 times what the initial connectors cost. But as you can well imagine, not catching fire was preference. And it took about 2 to 3 years to develop, manufacture, qualify, and write the specifications around it. But it solved the problem.
And so what did they do in the interim? If it took 3 years to fix, did they not release the product? What happened? Yeah.
Well, they were a little bit cautious about that, but they did try to get in to torque down the connectors. Yeah. And during the cable management, they didn't pull them to one side, which would loosen the parts. However, it still was a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So, what advice would you have had for them going back from the very beginning in the original design? What would you have told them to do?
Well, I would say they should have looked at it and determined that we can't assemble these connectors correctly, and put a stop to it right there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the cause that caused them to not do that, but that's what happened. But fortunately, we were able to solve the problem.
Yeah, great. That's a great example. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about these IoT product designs, I should say. What are three things that people who are looking to build IoT devices, what do they need to know or consider when it comes to RF connectors?
Sure, and this goes for everything. Basically, it's not just IoT, but specifically to IoT. You're normally running a frequency to 6 gigahertz. So you want to determine what your frequency is going to be. So you can use the correct interfaces, the correct cables to go to the 6 gigahertz correctly. Second thing is, I tell people you have to look at what is around the interface on the board, on the cable. You have to expect interference. Sometimes we call it EMI, electromagnetic interference. If this is the case, you're going to have to include shielding in the construction. You need to know the size limits. The environmental considerations. Is it going to get wet? Is there high heat? And ultimately, how much is this going to cost you? In order to do this correctly, I always tell them to sit down and talk to a very knowledgeable individual from a dependable connector company. Don't try to do the design yourself. It's better to have two heads working on the problem.
Yeah, and the expertise. I mean, that's the whole reason that Stone Age got involved with Breadware is we were developing our first IoT-enabled product, and it's like, oh, how are we going to do this without this type of expertise? And we went so much faster when we did just that. When we consulted with the experts and really honed in on exactly what we wanted to do. So I think that's really great advice. I think a lot of people underestimate how long and how expensive these product development initiatives are going to take, and you always get surprised. But if you do the planning up front, it makes a lot better difference.
Right. And don't ever think you know everything, because there's someone next to you that can say, hey, there's a better way to do this.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that information on RF connectors. How can people find you, both IMS and you personally?
Sure. The website for IMS is at this point www.imscs.com. Once you go on, you're going to see a website that's about to be changed in June, so it's being upgraded. To personally get a hold of me, my email address is rfiacco, Fiacco, at imscs.com. Or you can give me a call on my cell, which is 214-704-1115. Or if you happen to be in Germany, you stop in. They're in the Black Forest.
Just randomly stop by the Black Forest.
That's right.
Wonderful. Well, Rick, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate having you. And we look forward to partnering with you more in the future.
Yes, and keep in touch. Thanks, Kerry.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.